Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. We are back. We are actually live this evening. We haven't pre-recorded another show. It's back to normal, Rich. You're back from holiday. You've had a lovely 3-week break from podcasting, 2 weeks in lovely Florida. How was it, mate?
Yeah, it's good. It was a bit weird, to be honest, on Tuesday night, logging on and doing the pod. As you said, I think it's been longer than that. I think it's 3.5 weeks since I last did a pod. So yeah, it's nice to get away, recharge the batteries. Although I'm not sure Florida's really a place you go with young kids to recharge. I think I'm more tired than before I went. But it was a good time, and back just in time for things to kick off and go mental with drafts and things.
Well, yeah, as you said, it's draft week. What a time to be alive, Rich. It's draft week, and we don't have a number one quarterback that's going to go one overall, so the draft is wide open at the moment. But today we are going to be going through our pre-draft rookie rankings. Before we dive right into the amount of players we've got, because we've got to talk about what was it, Rich, we said before the show, about 20. Before we dive into all of that, I just want to point out that draft capital does play a part in both of our rankings. So post-draft, these rankings may move around a little bit, but as they are right now, are you ready to jump in, Rich? Because we'll go straight with the quarterback position.
Yeah, I think just before you dive in, I just think it's worth mentioning, obviously, we've talked through kind of each positional group in detail over the last 5 weeks now, including the sleep show we did with Matt. So we're not going to go into detail about each prospect, but I think the idea of this is really just us to talk through our finalised pre-draft rankings, and they are exactly as Liam said, pre-draft. They will, once draft capital gets added in, tweak slightly. But also I would kind of want to give you guys an idea where they sit in my kind of overall rankings, because I think it's important to give an idea around, I can sit here and say, Kenneth Walker is my RB, whatever, but actually, does that mean anything to you in the grand scheme of things, unless you know how high I am on him compared to other backs and where he sits overall? So yeah, I thought I'd try and give you that hint and try and give you a little bit more context to the rankings rather than just pure rookie rankings as such.
So you're showing me up basically because I haven't
put
them in my
rankings
yet.
We talked, bring people behind the curtain. We talked about this, and you said that you didn't like doing it until draft capital was finalised, and I completely get that. That was me previously. I didn't like it. I was persuaded by Dave to start doing it, so I've started doing it. So yeah, it's not to show you up at all. It's just, I think, because it shows the strength and weakness of a class, because you can sit here and say that, a person is your QB1, but they could be a QB1, but they're actually QB30 overall, or they could be a QB1 and they could be QB5 overall. That's a huge difference in terms of what they actually mean as such.
We'll have to get Dave back on so he can finally persuade me, because I don't think I was in a fit enough state when we had him on with my rookie rankings to be even able to look at putting them into my overall rankings. But Rich, as I've said, we've got a lot of players to cover, and we've just spent about 4 minutes talking about why we have or haven't put them in our dynasty rankings. So let's dive in at the quarterback position. We both agree on this one, Rich. Who do you have as your quarterback one in this rookie class?
I think it's no surprise. I've been banging the drum for him for 5 months now. It's Malik Willis. I think, look, there was talks 3 months ago that he wasn't going to get day one draft capital. I think that's a certainty now. I think his floor is the Steelers at, I want to say 18 of the Steelers picking. I believe
so.
I think that the chances of him being a top 10 pick are pretty high. I wouldn't be shocked if he was a top 5 pick, quite frankly. And I think that his mix of elite rushing production, and I don't use that lightly, I think he is going to walk into the NFL as a top 3 rushing quarterback. I think I'd probably put Lamar, maybe Jalen Hurts ahead of him, and then I'd stick him right in there, probably ahead of Kyler Murray. And I think he has got an incredible, in terms of just pure arm talent, he's there. Yes, he's very raw. And I think he's going to take some time to produce, but I think he walks in as an absolute fantasy stud whenever he steps on the field.
So just to clarify, Steelers have the 20th pick.
I was close.
But I think that's the farthest he's going to slip if he does. As you've said, I think he's got the highest upside in this class. And quite frankly, I don't think that he has as low of a floor as some other people may think, especially when compared to some of the other quarterbacks. I'm not going to go into it because I agree with you on basically everything you've said. This is the first disagreement we've got today, and we'll be having quite a couple of those by the looks of it. Rich, at quarterback 2, I have Sam Howell, and I know that you're not a fan of him. So who do you have as your quarterback 2, and why do we disagree?
So first of all, it's not that I don't like Sam Howell. I think on the podcast we did with Kenny, I really like Sam Howell, but I can't rank a guy high that I think the NFL don't love. And I think from everything you read, everything you hear, I think he's going to fall into out of the first round. And to me, that means he becomes a 3rd or 4th round rookie pick. I can't spend a top 2 round pick on a quarterback that isn't walking in to start and isn't a 1st round pick. So for me, Sam Howell is, he's down as my QB5 because I don't think he's going to get the chance to start straight away. And normally when a quarterback doesn't start straight away, unless they're a 1st round pick, they don't start at all. So I like Sam Howell. I think he's an intriguing prospect. This is a guy that had elite production his first 2 years and then basically became a running back last year and hardly threw the ball at all. But my QB2, I've got Matt Corral. People seem to have fallen out of love with him the last month or so. I think, the NFL draft hype machine seems to have dropped him down a little bit. But I still like him. I think he offers, that lightning quick release. And I basically think he's 2.0. And I still believe that he's going to be a day 1 draft pick, and I still think he's going to get a chance to start in 2022. So yeah, I'm not that high on him overall. He's my QB 24, so he's just ahead of Matt Ryan, to give you some kind of context in terms of how low I am on him overall. But yeah, that's where I sit, I guess.
I hear what you're saying about. I'll start with Sam Howell and defend him a little bit. I see what you're saying. He went from 146 yards rushing in 2020. I'm looking at the wrong year. 146 rushing yards in 2020, and then last year he went to 828. So 650 extra rushing yards on the ground. So that, to me, says that at least they're trusting him to run the ball and run it effectively. The part that I think people tend to forget is they tend to see the extra rushing yards and tend to not realize that he still threw for 3,000 yards last year on the same amount of passing attempts. So overall, he had more yards in both of those categories. But what I understand what you're saying. His passing production went down because obviously he was running the ball more. But at the same time, is it that much of an issue? I mean, he's proven he can pass the ball and pass the ball well. So now he's proving that he can run the ball as well and run it effectively. When he takes off, he looks like, dare I say it, Josh Allen. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to become the next Josh Allen.
That feels a big reach compared with that comparison. I'll be honest.
I'm not saying he's going to become the next Josh Allen. I'm just saying he reminds me of Josh Allen in the type of way that he runs the ball.
Okay.
Not a Lamar Jackson style runner, but a Josh Allen style runner. And then Matt Corral. I'll pass this back to you so you can jump in on that Sam Howell in a minute. Matt Corral, I've got him as my QB3 in this class, and I echo everything you've said. The only difference I have between Matt Corral and Sam Howell really is I suppose you've knocked Sam Howell more because of what you're hearing pre-draft about the quarterback class, especially around Howell, whereas I'm probably not listening to that as much. So that's why I've got him higher now. 4 ranks higher is completely different to what you've got. But to me, I agree with everything you've said. The only reason that Corral is at 3 rather than 2 for me is I've got Sam Howell so high up. Anyway, Rich, you can jump back in on Sam Howell.
No, I just think that, yeah, he, statistically had an okay season, but he regressed in every statistical category from 2020 to 2021. He had a worse completion. Yeah, but he had worse completion percentage. He had worse completion percentage over expectation. He had worse completion percentage in a clean pocket. He had worse yards. He had worse touchdowns. He had more interceptions. Like, he regressed from 2020 to 2021, which is not what you want to see from an NFL quarterback, quite frankly. I would
agree.
point out...
Let me just jump in there quickly. He did lose 4 of his offensive weapons to the NFL draft last year. Yes, Daz Newsome went in the 6th, Diami Brown in the 3rd, Javonte Williams, who is now a top 5 dynasty running back, and Michael Carter, who surprised everyone from the 4th round to the Jets. Yes, he regressed, but he also lost 4 of his top weapons, and that's why he started running the ball a lot more.
Bryce Young lost 2 elite first rounds wide receivers and improved. Like, we can see that's part of being at college. You're going to lose pieces. If we're sitting here and saying Sam Howell lost a 3rd round wide receiver and a 6th round wide receiver and making that as excuses as to why he regressed, I think we're making excuses for him. Let's be honest. That feels like an excuse if you're saying, but he lost 2 really average wide receivers, so he regressed. Like, he's not losing Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. He's losing guys that, quite frankly, aren't going to cut it at the NFL level. So
I get your point, and I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying, let's not have that go unnoticed that he did lose.
Absolutely. And look,
an offense.
I said this on the pod with Kenny. My QB ranks are very flexible depending on what the NFL think. And if Sam Howell is a 1st round pick, if you said to me, Sam Howell, all 5 of these top quarterbacks go at pick 20 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Sam Howell's probably my QB3. I'd go Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell, because I think that he's, in a vacuum, the 3rd best quarterback and got the 3rd best fantasy potential. But the reason I've got him at QB5 is because I don't think he's going to go in the top 20. I don't think he's going to go in the top 50 picks. And I think he's going to become an afterthought of NFL and fantasy teams. And therefore, I can't get excited about him.
That makes complete sense. We haven't got time to keep arguing about this one, Rich, so let's move on. Our next 2 quarterbacks, so you've got them at 3 and 4, I've got them at 4 and 5, but we've got them in the same order, and that's Desmond Ridder and Kenny Pickett. But looks of it, both of us aren't very keen on Kenny Pickett, and both of us mediocre on Desmond Ridder. Is there anyone that you want to speak about specifically from those 2?
Quite like to speak about both if I can. I think, look, I'll hold my hands up. If everything goes as I expect, and Kenny Pickett is potentially the 2nd quarterback in the 1st round, and only 2 of them go in the 1st round, then yes, he will likely be my QB2. He's currently my QB4 because I don't get it. I don't see it. I think he is average. I don't like his... People throw around, but he's mobile, he can run around, but he doesn't produce rushing potential. Like, I think there's 2 things that people are saying at the moment. He's Mac Jones and he's Joe Burrow, and I just can't get either. He is nowhere near in the world of Joe Burrow in terms of that rushing production, in terms of Joe Burrow was a one-hit wonder that produced late and kind of, there were reasons for that. Kenny Pickett's been a 4-year starter. He's been in the offense for 5 years. And he's not Mac Jones. Kenny Pickett is an averagely accurate quarterback that can create plays moving around in the pocket late. But that's not, he's not Russell Wilson by doing that. He is going to get found out at the next level with that. I don't see it at all. I can't get him. If Carolina take him at 6 overall, I am gobsmacked. And I just think he's going to be a complete flop at the next level, quite frankly. How people can view his tape and say Mac Jones, I think is outrageous. I wonder if people are just going, oh, well, he's not a rushing threat and he's white, so he's Mac Jones. But yeah, I don't like Kenny Pickett at all, which is why I've got him ranked quite so low. Desmond Ridder, I love Desmond Ridder. I don't get how you can watch Desmond Ridder's film and not love him. I think he to me, he is everything that everybody says Kenny Pickett is. He is a guy that just gets it from the quarterback standpoint. He is a accomplished starter. He is a guy that has produced at the college level. He has taken a smaller program to the college football playoffs and overproduced based on the talent around him. I don't get why the NFL don't love Desmond Ridder. I think if he is a top 32 pick, then he'd probably be my QB2 because I really, really like Desmond Ridder. The reason I've got him at 3 is that I just think the NFL, he's on that fringe first round kind of contention.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of the above. He's never had the rushing upside of a Joe Burrow in college, but then he's also definitely not a statue in the pocket. He's very mobile, and I think that's what all of these QBs show, is that they're all mobile, especially around the pocket, but only a few of them are actually running and rushing properly. Desmond Ridder, I got really excited about his tape. The only issue I really had with him was the production numbers. There's something more that I wanted from that, and as you said, he's a fringe first rounder at the moment. So if he does get first round capital, I can see him moving up my rankings very quickly. So moving on, Rich.
I don't like the quarterbacks. I don't like the quarterbacks outside of Malik Willis. So let's move on and talk about something more exciting.
Yeah, let's get more excited for the running backs. So at the moment, you're excited about the first one, though, right?
I'm very, 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 very excited about the first one. The rest, less so.
All right. I'll let you unwrap the first ranking.
Yeah, I won't dive in too much detail because we talked about it with Dave on the running back preview show. Breece Hall's going to be fantastic. I'm so excited about Breece Hall. He's my RB6 currently in Dynasty ranks. So the only running backs I would prefer over Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, CMC, and Javonte Williams. And that is it. I would take him. He's ranked one spot ahead of Austin Eckler. I am really, really, really excited about Breece Hall. And to be honest, that would be the case even with like mid-second round draft capital. There's some potential that he might sneak into the back of the first round, but he ticks every box for me. He is absolutely an elite production profile. I think loved him on film. I have no concerns in terms of his rushing potential, his receiving potential. I think he is going to be an absolute stud at the next level. And yeah, that's me out.
I am not going to sit here and echo everything you said. The only thing I will say is, I think now the second round of the NFL draft is now the new first round for running backs. I think it's not going to knock them too much if they do get second round draft capital. I just think that first round running backs will be far and few between and will essentially become an exception at the moment anyway, just because of how dense the running back position is. But as I'm not going to echo too much, let's move on to our running back 2. Both of us have got Kenneth Walker. I'll start. I looked at the tape and I wasn't expecting huge or to be excited or anything along those lines, but I ended up getting really into the tape, and that's one thing I look at when I'm looking at running backs or rookies in general, but especially running backs, is actually getting that feel for the tape. And Kenneth Walker had that. I mean, looking at his production profile, yes, he doesn't have much outside of last year, but he's got a valid reason for that. He did transfer, and Rich, I don't think I could foresee anyone having a different running back too. I don't want to become an echo chamber across all of Dynasty space, but at the moment, I just have these two clear cut above the rest and within tiers of their own.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think 2 months ago, Isaiah Spiller was very much the RB2, but I think a poor combine's dropped him down. Look, there's two concerns about Kenneth Walker. It's the pass catching and it's the 1 year wonder. I think if you just took, this 1 year and put that as his only year, forgetting what came before, then I think he'd probably be going higher. And it's just a case of, okay, yes, he had to transfer and he didn't get a chance, but is there a reason why? Is it just a bit of a 1 year fluke? I really like Kenneth Walker. I think he's going to be good. I think the lack of receiving work is probably a scheme thing rather than necessarily him. I think that's probably being a little bit overblown. He's my RB19, so I've got him one spot behind Michael Carter. I've got him one spot ahead of Leonard Fournette. I think he comes in and he's a solid RB2 for your dynasty team. I don't think he's going to be anything more than that. I don't think he's ever going to be an elite producer. I think the NFL are going to like him. I think he's always going to have a role for the next 3-4 years, certainly.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going to sit here and echo anymore. The only thing I will say is I do think that the receiving talent is there. As you said, I just think it was a scheme fit that didn't benefit him there. So running back 3, yet again, we agree with someone you mentioned, just Isaiah Spiller. Rich, Isaiah Spiller, I mean, to start off with, when I was watching his tape, I wasn't too excited. And I think I got into it the more that I watched it. But the one thing I struggled is he didn't necessarily have that top end breakaway speed on the tape. I don't know what his metrics were at the combine, but he just didn't feel like he had that breakaway speed. However, he looked really shifty and could get side to side really quickly, found those gaps and found the cuts really well. And that's why I've got him at 3, because I just feel like the other two we've already spoken about can take any run to the house, whereas I struggled with Spiller on that part. But he's also been very consistent production-wise all the way through his collegiate career, so that's why I've got him at 3 at the moment.
Yeah, so I don't like Isaiah Spiller. I think to give you the info, so he ran a 4.63 at his pro day. He didn't run at the combine, okay. Which is partly of the reason why he fell down draft boards. Isaiah Spiller is my RB3, but if you said to me that I can take Isaiah Spiller with an early second round pick, or I can take any of the next running backs, any of the next 10 running backs with a 3rd or 4th round pick, I'm preferring the lottery tickets. To me, this draft class in terms of the running back position is the 2 top guys, and I absolutely love Breece Hall, and I'm okay with Kenneth Walker, but I'm all about those late round flyers at the running back position, those 3rd and 4th round picks. I'm certainly not going to be spending a 2nd round pick on any running back in this draft class, because, as I said, outside of those top 2, I just don't particularly like it. I think, Isaiah Spiller, he comes in, so he's a 72nd percentile player in my model. His distinct lack of weight adjusted speed score really hits him. I think, yes, he produced well, in a good school in the SEC, but I'm not excited about him as a prospect. And I tweeted out today some players that I'm going to end up with a lot of, players that I'm going to end up with not a lot of. And I think he's definitely one that I'm probably going to end up with none of, because, at the cost he's going to go at, which is probably going to be that late 1st, early 2nd in most drafts, I'm quite happy for somebody else to go and grab him.
Yeah. Again, don't we all know that you love your late round running backs? But I'm with you. I think the cost is going to outweigh the value. But let's move on to the running back 4. What we're going to do, Rich, because we've got a slight disagreement, we'll start off with your running back 4, which is Brian Robinson, but I have him at 5. So why have you got him at 4 and why have I got him at 5 is the question. I really liked him on tape. I think the one thing I have a question about is the 1-year production, but he played for Alabama without trying to make excuses, Rich. It's a very tough school to get the carries, so I can understand why he had 1 year worth of production and did really well in that 1 year, but I think that's the one thing that's shying me away at the moment. Can you convince me to put him at 4?
I think for me, these next 3 guys that I've got, so my RB4, RB5, and RB6, I've got them back to back to back in terms of my rookie ranks, but I've also got them that way in my veteran ranks. So I've got Brian Robinson as my RB34. I've got Rashad White as my RB36 and Zamir White as my RB37. And to me, these 3 are all in a tier, and it's basically a what do you fancy kind of thing. And I think that Brian Robinson is the guy I'd probably feel safest about over those 3. I think he's going to be a solid 1B, potentially 1A committee back. I think he does everything well, but does nothing exceptionally. And I feel quite comfortable that he's going to be a solid, NFL running back. I'm happy with that. Rashad White is your pass catcher. I think he could be an absolute steal. I think if he ends up in the right situation, he's got kind of like a David Johnson potential. But I think his floor is like a Naeem Hines usage. I hate saying James White because everybody says James White, but I think he is an elite receiving back potential. That's satellite back. And then Zamir White is, his nickname Zeus for a reason. That I think that he's got, if he didn't have those 2 horrific injuries, we could potentially be talking about him in the Kenneth Walker tier. He's got the elite upside. And if he puts it all together and at the next level, he could be incredible. But he doesn't come without risk because of those injuries, because of, the way his career went with Georgia. And, the fact that he was sharing the backfield with James Cook over the last year. So it's kind of those 3 are very much in a tier for me, and it's like what do you fancy? Do you fancy the safe guy in Brian Robinson? Do you fancy the pass catcher in Rashad White, or do you fancy the potentially boom bust pick in Zamir White? And that's why I've got them 4, 5, 6 in that order.
So for you listeners, I've got Zamir White at 4, Brian Robinson at 5, and then a different RB6. Rashad White is my RB10,
which is outrageous. Why are you so low on Rashad White?
I didn't see it on the tape. Honestly, I just couldn't get behind it. I don't really know how to explain it. He was shifty enough, but I think he could have been better in every category that I could see.
Are you concerned about him only being a 3rd down back at the next level?
I think that is a main concern, yes. But I think he's probably the one that can change the most with draft capital, because I'm probably predicting him now. Let me check, actually, because I did do predictions. So I'm predicting him as a 5th round pick. Just as off the top of my head, kind of what I saw on the tape, what I think the NFL is going to see and what they're going to want from him. But if he gets taken in the 4th or even the 3rd round, he's going to jump up because, as I said, I don't have him very highly in my predictions, as in NFL round. Sorry, just to clarify that.
I'm just looking at grinding the mocks. Have got him as the 108th overall pick in terms of, so that's 129 mock drafts. They've got him 108 overall, which is an early 4th round pick, they reckon, and he's the RB6.
If he goes early 4th, I'd bump him up dependent on where the other guys that I've got ahead of him go. But I think I'm more skeptical about him purely because of the way that he was used in college, and I don't know how that's going to be seen in the NFL. But yeah, let's move on. I just want to talk about one last one. I know this is 7, Rich, before 7 running backs before you jump on me, but I've got a different RB6, and I can see you got him at RB7. So that is Tyler Beatty. How do you feel about Tyler Beatty? Why is he your 7 rather than any higher? And I can see that you've got him quite a bit behind the previous pack, shall we say, the previous tier.
Yeah, I really like Tyler Beatty. He popped well in my model. He was 91st percentile in terms of pre-draft. I really liked what I saw on tape. I think he's produced well. He's played well in terms of elite competition in the SEC. The reason he's low for me, I think I'm still higher than consensus in terms of having him at RB7. But the reason I'm low is that I just expected draft capital is low, and I don't think he's expected to be I think he's a 6th or 7th round pick in terms of grinding the mocks. So yeah, look, if he finds his way potentially into day 2, early day 3, he'll likely climb for me because there's nothing there that I dislike. I just don't think that the NFL are going to love him the way that perhaps they could, and therefore I think his it's hard to rank him in the top 6 when he's not going to be nothing more than a late round pick.
I get that. I feel like he's going to be a bit higher, but again, I'm sat in my bedroom right now talking to you on a Dynasty podcast. I'm not in a front office, so my prediction is useless, basically.
You could have fooled me. I thought you were sat in the LA Rams draft room right now, Liam. So I'm shocked to hear.
Of course. Yeah, as if it's not sunny enough outside right now. Come on, Rich. Let's be realistic. So, Rich, let's move on to the wide receivers. So, by the looks of it, we've had a couple of texts, or at least a couple of conversations, shall I say, over the past week or so. And you think I'm outrageous, but we'll get round to that.
Yeah.
So at wide receiver 1, we both have Garrett Wilson. Now you got him as your wide receiver 14 in Dynasty rankings. I kind of like that spot for him. I might have to steal that one, but yeah, I kind of like that spot, wide receiver 14-ish. But Garrett Wilson, I liked everything on the tape that I saw. In my opinion, feels like the most complete wide receiver, and I also think he's going to be the first off the board, and that's going to play a big part in both of our rankings, going in the first round and going early in the first round. Rich, I can see you want to get in, so there you go.
I really like Garrett Wilson. I think he's got a fantastic release package. I think he's a very good route runner. I think he's polished. He outproduced Chris Olave, which is another receiver that I love this year. In the last season with Ohio State, and I think that this is a guy that for me is going to be a dynasty wide receiver 2 the second he steps on the field, and that's why I've got him ranked there. I've got him one spot ahead of Devonta Smith. I have very little concerns over Garrett Wilson. He's 95th percentile prospect in terms of the model. He's a 77 in terms of the reception perception single score that I use. So I'm very high on Garrett Wilson and think he's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm with you. So this is where you're going to call me outrageous. So your wide receiver 2 is my wide receiver 5, and my wide receiver 2 is your wide receiver 4. So we really don't agree with this ranking, but Rich, you got Drake London. We'll start there. Your wide receiver 2, my wide receiver 5. Go on. I'll let you go for it straight away.
I'll be honest, I kind of want you to go first because I want you to try to explain how you've got him at 5. I think, look, this is a guy that is a elite producer at the catch point. I think he does everything you'd want a prototypical X receiver to do. I think he's produced in an offense where he's had NFL caliber wide receivers lined up opposite him and has outproduced them. I think he's going to get decent draft capital. I think he's probably going to be a top 15 pick come Thursday. I've got very few concerns. I know the one thing you're going to say is that he separates or wins with contested catches, and I think that gets thrown around as a negative by a lot of people. When you look at N'Keal Harry and JJ Arcega-Whiteside and people like that struggled at the catch point. But the same can be said about Jamar Chase. And, in college, he won because he bullied smaller DBs and he won at the catch point. And I think for me, Drake London, with his basketball background, I think that allows him to separate late. That allows him to win with body position, and it allows him to have that high number of contested catch wins. And I think that for me, I don't see those contested catches as a negative, because I think that this, whether you, and I said this on the show with Mike, whether you separate at the release, during the route, or at the catch point, I don't care as long as you separate. And, you've got Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave that separate at points 1 or 2. You've got Jameson Williams that separates with speed, and you've got Drake London that separates late. I think all three of those translate to the NFL, because I think Drake London has tools that allow him to separate at the NFL level. It's not a N'Keal Harry who was just bigger and stronger than college receivers, and therefore when he got to the NFL couldn't separate. I really think and believe that Drake London will be a success. I'm pretty high. Where have I got him? I got him wide receiver 19, so that's one spot behind Elijah Moore. I'm high on this overall wide receiver draft class. I really believe in all of them. But yeah, if I could move Drake London higher, I would, quite frankly.
I do like this draft class a lot. Let's just start off with that. And I'll also start off with, it's not the fact, or how do I word this? I don't like contested catch situations. If someone wins in a contested catch situation, that's always going to be a plus. If they lose in it, that's always going to be a negative, obviously. But I don't put a lot of stock into contested catches. And purely for the reasons that you've said around N'Keal Harry, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, alongside a plethora of other receivers, I like that he wins them, but I don't put as much stock into it as other people do, i.e. you, by the sounds of it. Again, coming to his roots, one thing that I said to you when I told you my rankings, and you basically slandered me on private message about London, was his route running. And again, I'm not saying that I don't like the fact that he separates late in terms of as a negative overall. I think it's a positive. Obviously, he's separating at some point, but my concern is if he's separating late, and as you say, you come to the NFL, the corners are bigger, they're going to be a bit more agile than college corners, or at least most of them. Then what's he going to win with if he doesn't win with that? And that's the part that I am most concerned about. I will say that I see a massive teardrop after Drake London. I have the top 5, and then a huge tier between them and every other wide receiver. So I'm not saying that I don't like London. I just don't like him as much as the other wide receivers, especially when I watch him on tape. Production-wise, he's good. I can't say he's not. He is a top-end producer. I do prefer some other production profiles, but I suppose he's not my type of wide receiver. I prefer speedy guys, yak guys, whereas he kind of feels like, even though he can break tackles because he's so big that he's hard to bring down, I do also believe that isn't going to translate as well as people think to the NFL. And I know that you're ready to drive all the way to my house and attack me for this, but I just don't see him producing wide receiver 2 numbers immediately. I think it'll take him a little bit to get there, just acclimatizing to the NFL. But I'm not ruling it out, and I think that he is one of the top 5 wide receivers in this class. And as I said, there's a huge teardrop after them. It's just I really struggle with winning late in a route, because if that doesn't work in the next level, which is most likely the part of the route where it's probably not going to work well in the NFL, then what else is he going to win with?
The fact he's 6'5" and bigger than every corner in the league.
Oh, here we go. Right, Rich, we could sit here. This is another Sam Howell situation. We could sit here and we could argue about this. I mean, if the NFL do take him as the first wide receiver, top 10, then I'll relook at it. But I just struggle with him.
Let's move on to your wide receiver 2 so that we can have some more disagreement.
Go on then. My wide receiver 2 is Jameson Williams. Your wide receiver 4, Rich. Do you want to go first this time, or are you happy for me to take it?
I don't dislike Jameson Williams. Okay, he's my wide receiver.
Exactly what I'm saying.
He's my wide receiver 25 overall. I think that he's going to be a better NFL wide receiver than a fantasy wide receiver. I think that he, does things from an offensive standpoint that don't translate to fantasy points. And I think, he shifts coverage. He brings that safety over the top just with his speed. I think he's going to be one of these guys, who's the Ravens guy? Torrey Smith, that produced an obscene amount of PI yards every year because he was faster and guys kept grabbing him. And I fully foresee that as Jameson Williams at the next level. I like him, but I just love the 3 guys ahead of him more. For me, there's 3 guys, then a teardrop with Jameson Williams, and then another teardrop to the next guys we're going to talk about.
Yeah. See, I'm going to sit here and say that's okay. And you are going to have to understand how to do that for when I talk about Drake London, because that basically sums up what I'm talking about. They're different players, but I just see them as different tiers, that's all.
Yeah.
Jameson Williams, for me, I understand what you're saying about being a better NFL wide receiver. He's going to stretch the field wherever he's put. Safety is always going to have to account for him running a deep route. But for me, if an NFL team decide to take him and don't always put him on those deep routes just to stretch the field and start using him in yak situations, that's where I start to see the fantasy production coming in, because he stops being more like an expensive MVS and becomes more like a kind of like what Tyreek was prior to last year. Like people don't realize how many yak yards Tyreek had, and I think that's kind of not to the same level. I don't ever predict top level comps, but I think if he's used in a yak situation, then he's going to have a lot more fantasy production than people realize if they're thinking like that.
I wouldn't hate to see him used like Miami used Jalen Waddle last year, in terms of that short to intermediate, get the ball in his hands and let him go. Look, he's my wide receiver 4, and I've taken some comments about him being low. As I said, he's my wide receiver 25 overall. Current ADP per DLF have got him at wide receiver 29, so I'm higher than consensus in terms of where I have him. It's just that I'm a little bit lower in terms of where I have him in this class.
Yeah, I get it, because as we both said multiple times, we love the top 5 in this class. Let's carry on. So you've got
top six.
Okay, top 6. So your wide receiver 3, Rich, Chris Olave, is my wide receiver 4. As you've said, Garrett Wilson outproduced him, and that is insane considering how well Olave played. When I watched the tape, I absolutely loved Olave. I loved his route running. He doesn't just win with speed. Subtle movements in his route running really throw corners off. And I think that's going to translate well to the NFL. Rich, I'm interested to hear your opinion on Olave. And I know the only reason that we have him any differently is because I've got Jameson Williams higher.
I absolutely love Chris Olave. Those top three, so Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Chris Olave, are pretty much interchangeable to me. It feels like Olave is the consensus wide receiver 5, or in some cases 6, in terms of this draft class. And I'm happy with that, because that means I'm probably going to end up with loads of him. I think he's a smooth operator. I've got no concerns about him translating to the next level. I think he's probably the guy that produces best in that rookie season. I think he's going to walk in and be a consummate pro immediately. I'm really, really excited about him. I've got very few concerns. He produced at elite rates pretty much every year in college. The one knock on him is that he's a late declare, but I think for me, I kind of give a little bit of leeway with everything that's going on with COVID and all that kind of thing. I think that he could easily have come out last year and been a first-round pick. And the fact that he's gone back to try and win national championship, the fact that everything with COVID that was going on, I don't knock him at all. He's my wide receiver 3. I've got him literally back-to-back with London in terms of my overall ranks. I'm very high on Olave and comfortable that I'm going to get a lot of him in terms of rookie drafts and potential startups in the next few months.
Yeah, he's one person that I'm really hoping to get a lot more or get a lot of shares of. So moving on, Rich, we've spoken about Jameson Williams. Is there anything you want to add there?
No.
Your wide receiver 4. Okay, so your wide receiver 5, and keen listeners will have heard, you haven't heard my wide receiver 3, and that's because it's this guy, Treylon Burks. Rich, I'm going to hand it over to you because I want to see why you've got him much lower than I have.
I like Treylon Burks. Okay, let's give that. He's my wide receiver 30. It's not that I dislike him. Okay, but I don't see this super hype that everybody keeps talking to me about. I think he's a raw prospect. I don't think he's the level of athlete that people are pitching him to be. I think he's got, incredible ceiling and potential. But I think whenever there's a guy that's big, that's fast, that's good with the ball in his hands, we overhype them. And I don't think he's going to be an elite producer. So, yeah, he's wide receiver 5 for me. He is a tier below the top 4. And he is pretty much back-to-back with my wide receiver 6, who I also really like. I know you keep saying there's a top 4, but to me, I really believe there's a top 6.
So, personally, I understand your point around not seeing it translating into elite production. I struggled when I looked at the tape the first time round just because his routes weren't crisp enough for me. I suppose I'm more of a speed guy when it comes to wide receivers, but I found that he found separation a lot earlier than a guy we've already spoken about, Drake London. But I really enjoyed his tape from terms of he didn't just go down on any play. He always found a way to get open, and he stayed up upon first contact 90% of the time. From, again, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of the time. So I get your point, and I think Treylon Burks is very close to Chris Olave. It's kind of like a 3A, 3B situation. And that could change with the draft, with where they go and who they go to, I suppose. And as you really, really, really want to hammer this point home about there being a top 6, not a top 5, we're both in consensus, or we're both in agreement that this guy is our wide receiver 6, and that is Jahan Dotson. Rich, why have you got Jahan Dotson there?
I really like him. I really like him. I think he flashes in the model. He's a 85th percentile pre-draft. I think he's probably going to sneak into the back end of the first round when it comes to the NFL draft. He's a 74 in the reception perception single number scale, which puts him fifth in the class. So behind Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Sky Moore, and Drake London. I think he's, I have very few concerns about him translating to the next level. I think he is going to come in and be a solid NFL wide receiver 2. I think from a fantasy production, I think he can easily produce wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 seasons for you. He's my wide receiver 33 in terms of my overall ranks, which when you consider his ADP at the moment is wide receiver 47. I think that shows you just how much I like Jahan Dotson.
I agree with everything you said. I think his routes are really crisp, and yeah, I can't disagree with anything you've said, apart from where you've got him in your dynasty rankings. When I come around to doing them, I don't think I'll have him at wide receiver 33. I think I'm a little bit lower. I think wide receiver 30, probably 8 to 42-ish range sounds about right, just off the top of my head. But I understand why you feel so strongly about Dotson. I completely see it as well. I just don't think I'm as high as you. Now, because we don't have much time, Rich, I'm going to just highlight some of the names that we've got in our wide receiver top 10. Sorry, just to round it out. So at the moment, you have George Pickens at 7. I've got him at 8. I really like Pickens. I can't fault him too much. Where do you want to go with it, Rich?
No, I just quickly dive in. I really like George Pickens. I think if I look back in a year's time, he's likely to be the one that I'm most wrong on. I think he could be a really good, typical X receiver at the next level. The injury concerns me slightly. The lack of production over the last 2 years because of the injury. But look, it's not that I hate him. He's my wide receiver 41. I'm higher than consensus in terms of his ADP. It's just that I prefer 6 guys ahead of him in this class, quite frankly.
So my wide receiver 7 is Christian Watson, who you've also got at wide receiver 9. He's a guy that I wasn't too interested in to start off when I watched his tape, and then I went back to see what I was missing because I had him extremely low. And I found that one thing that I really knocked him on was reliance on contested catch situations. It must have just been the games that I watched, because obviously I don't have the time to go and watch every single game of every single player. I think it was just certain games that I watched, he must have caught more contested catches than other games. Because when I went back, I had to readjust his rank quite significantly and bumped him up to wide receiver 7. Is there anything you want to add there, Rich? I think he's a great route runner, but again, he's got the top end speed. I just hope that he can separate a little bit more and a little bit more cleanly at the next level.
No, I'll be honest. Christian Watson's the point at which I kind of turn away from wide receivers in this draft and where I'm at in terms of rookie drafts. I can see myself drafting all of the top 8. But at that point in the draft, we're talking, end of the second round. That's the point at which I'm turning around and drafting running backs. I don't love Christian Watson. I think he relies too much on that speed. And I'm not. He's not the kind of guy that I'm going to take, basically. So yeah, for me, he's the cutoff. I really like the top 8, and I think I can see myself drafting all of the top 8. But after that, I'm probably just going to punt and go and draft some running backs instead.
Again, I can see it, but there's a few more that we should talk about, Rich. So you've got Sky Moore at wide receiver 8. I've got him at wide receiver 9. I think that he kind of feels like an Elijah Moore, but not as good. And I know a lot of people are saying that, oh, he might go in the first round to the Packers, or may even go like early second round. And if he does, then I'll have another look. But even then, I can't see it personally. I think he's going to go a bit later, and he's going to disappoint in the draft.
Sky Moore's like my wide receiver kryptonite. He's small school, early declare, elite route runner that's can play outside but also play in the slot. Like he's everything that I fall in love with when it comes to wide receivers. I'm doing everything I can to keep him, feet on the ground and not rank him too high. Look, he's, Mahomes got him in reception as the best route runner in this class. He produces his 91st percentile prospects in my model. I really, really like Sky Moore. If he got first round draft capital, he'd probably break into my top 5 or 6. He does everything. The concern is he just going to be a slot receiver at the next level? And I don't think he will be. But that's the sort of thing that's keeping him at 8. But again, we're talking about 8 wide receivers there that I really like, and I feel comfortable having on my dynasty roster as a, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. If you can get Sky Moore in the middle of the second round, come rookie day, rookie drafts, I think you're going to be pretty happy, because I do think he is going to be a guy that produces for you very quickly.
Understandable. And for those listeners that have got confused, because I've been throwing names and numbers around everywhere, Rich's top 8 that he's just spoken about is Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, Treylon Burks, Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, and Sky Moore. I'm only going to mention these 2. I'm not going to dive into them, Rich. But at 10, we both have a different wide receiver. You've got David Bell, and I've got John Mechie. I really like John Mechie, and I quite like David Bell when I looked at the tape, but I just can't get him higher in my ranks at the moment. I do want to go and take another look at them, though. Anything to add there before I move on to the tight ends?
Nope.
So let's move on to the tight ends, Rich, and close this show out. And I think this is going to be a very fast segment. I think we both like the wide receivers and really don't like this tight end class. So at 1, you've got Trey McBride. I have him at tight end 3. But I'm just going to clarify this with, I'm not drafting any of these tight ends until late 3rd, 4th round. I just don't draft tight ends in rookie drafts. I'd rather use them for picks, as like late round picks, as wide receivers or running backs. Sorry. So, Rich, feel free to dive in there. Trey McBride, you got him at 1. I've got him at 3.
Yeah, we can keep it quick. Look, Trey McBride, I'm okay with. I think he's going to be a solid NFL pro. I think he's, he does everything. He is a solid producer, and I think, I can keep saying solid over and over again, but that's basically him. But to echo basically what you've said, look, I'm not spending draft capital on any of these guys. If I need a tight end, I might take Trey McBride when it comes to that middle of the second round. But outside of him, I'm just going to draft him for 1. There's none of these guys that I love. I think Isaiah Likely's got some really good potential. I think Greg Dulcich, if he ends up in a good situation, could be good. And I think, look, I'll let you talk about Jelani Woods, because I know you're overhyping him. But I think that I just don't think he's going to produce in the NFL. I think that body type and the way he plays, I just don't think it's going to translate. But if you want to go and waste some draft capital, then go and draft the rookie tight end.
Yeah, I'm with you on the drafting tight end situation. I'd much rather pick them up off waivers. I think they're just disappointing the first year, unless there are Pitts, and even then he disappointed for the draft capital that people spent on him, most likely. Then I just don't bother with tight ends in rookie drafts. So for listeners, your top four are the same as my top, or the same names as top four, but we've got them in a completely different order. So you've got tight end 1 is Trey McBride, tight end 2 is Isaiah Likely, Greg Dulcich at 3, and Jelani Woods at 4. And I've got that basically flipped. I've got Jelani Woods, Greg Dulcich, Trey McBride, and Isaiah Likely. Now, I like Isaiah Likely just because of the type of tight end he is. But I want to see a little bit more from his blocking. But I think the biggest thing with tight ends is the NFL will draft them completely differently to what we're looking at, because we're looking for fantasy relevant plays, and the NFL have an entire second half of the tight end position, which is blocking, that they need to look at as well. So I think some of these guys will get drafted in the 5th, 6th round, maybe. Kind of like a Brevin Jordan from last year. You know that I was high on him as a tight end sleeper last year, but he didn't go until the 5th or 6th round. I think it was the 5th. But that's just because his blocking wasn't there, and eventually I do think that some of these players will get there. The only reason I wanted to touch on Jelani Woods is, yes, I see what you're saying. He's 6'7", 252 pounds. I get what you're saying. You don't think that it's going to translate to the NFL, but he has the best profile going into the draft in terms of his speed or speed score, his agility. I think he's just everything you want from a fancy relevant tight end, if he can get good enough draft capital and go to a situation like the Texans last year with Brevin Jordan and have that opportunity. But it really depends on where he goes. And I know that we tend to say that landing spot doesn't matter, but for tight ends, I believe it really does. But I think it matters in going into their second year, if not going into their third year, because that's when they're most likely to break out. Rich, is there anything you want to add on Jelani Woods before we sign off?
No, just don't draft any of them. Move on.
So that section took that segment took like 3 minutes because neither of us want to draft them. But guys, if you are doing anything for the draft, I really hope you enjoy it. The draft is on Thursday, so please, if you don't at least watch the first round, go back and watch it, because it is always fun, even if you skip through all the breaks and all the waiting for picks. If you have any questions about our rankings, feel free to message me or Rich. And until then, guys, enjoy the draft, and we'll see you next week.